and discussed how we can support your leadership and vision of a fully integrated African continent. This session will build on that work. In particular, this session will focus on three key priorities. One, the promotion of international rules and norms that advance prosperity and security for all. Two, a plan to strengthen cooperation between the United States and Africa in multilateral institutions. And three, an identification of ways to make progress within these institutions on pressing challenges, including the issue of food security, climate change, and security in the Sahel. I am grateful for the opportunity to hear directly from each of you so we can build on areas of alignment and identify a plan of action through which we can jointly manage global and regional issues. Regarding international organizations and initiatives, specifically the UN Security Council and the G20, African countries should be represented through permanent seats at the table. The United States joins African nations to seek consensus on a significant expansion of the UN Security Council to include new permanent seats for countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. As President Joe Biden announced earlier today, our administration will also seek full membership for the African Union in the G20. And we look forward to working with the AU, the Indian G20 presidency, and other G20 members toward that end. Our cooperation in multilateral institutions is vital for so many reasons, including that these are the institutions where we come together to uphold rules and norms. We gather at a time when many of these international rules and norms are under threat. For example, sovereignty and territorial integrity, unimpeded commerce, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Let us remember, these rules and norms exist for a reason. They advance security, stability, and prosperity around the world. They protect lives and livelihoods. And when they are violated, the effects are felt globally. For example, Russia's brutal war in Ukraine has led to disruptions to food and energy supplies that affect all of our economies. In light of this, we must all recommit to the rules and norms in the founding documents of the UN and the AU. We must defend them, promote them, and build on them. Regarding the United Nations specifically, the Biden-Harris administration has worked and will continue to work to restore and strengthen America's participation in the UN. We will stand firmly behind the UN Charter and the spirit of the United Nations, which is centered around collective action to address problems that affect us all, including peace and security, public health, sustainable development, and human rights. At the same time, we have heard from many of you who have concerns about the ability of the United Nations to fulfill its mission. As President Joe Biden said at this year's General Assembly, the United States takes these concerns seriously. We commit to a more inclusive, effective, and credible Security Council, which includes promoting responsible behavior by all Security Council members, such as refraining from the use of the veto, except in rare and extraordinary circumstances. Of course, our multilateral engagement and partnership extends beyond the UN. The United States is a long-standing supporter of the African Union. In 2006, the United States was the first non-African country to establish a diplomatic mission to the AU. Since then, we have worked together to support peace building and prevent conflict across the continent. We have worked to strengthen the partnership between our private sectors, and together our public health agencies have combated Ebola breakouts and COVID-19. We also intend to strengthen the United States' partnership with regional economic communities. We support these regional economic communities because, of course, they help foster integration in Africa, and because each region, of course, has distinct challenges and needs. Over the course of this session, let us work together to identify additional areas of cooperation between the United States and these communities. As you know, yesterday during the U.S.-Africa Business Forum, the United States Trade Representative signed a memoranda of understanding with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat to help increase intra-regional trade with Africa. In the past 2 years, we have made important progress together. And we must, and we will, do more. As part of this, the United States is committed to working with African nations to strengthen our multilateral cooperation. I thank you each for your participation in this convening, and I look forward to our discussion. And with that, I will now invite Commissioner Fake to speak.
Excellence, Madame Kamala Harris, vice-présidente des États-Unis d'Amérique.
Excellency, Madam Kamala Harris, ladies and gentlemen, multilateralism in this important program of the summit proves our vision common of international relationship based on shared values, aiming at finding solutions to the numerous global challenges. This challenge is all the more important that the African Union, since it was born 20 years ago, has articulated all of its diplomacy on multilateralism. The end of the Cold War gave us hope for a geopolitical context that would be favorable for multilateralism and for its consolidation to the benefit of solidarity among the people of the world. This choice of the AU is based on the values linked to multilateralism and is based in our hope of an international arena not only organized around the interests of the more powerful states. We should only consider, we should not negate the role of other states that are not as powerful. The recognition of the others, the interests of others, the values of others, the dignity of others are fundamental. In multilateralism, such as it is accepted by all and defended by all. Multilateralism should be a multilateralism based on alliances, based on solidarity, and Africa is acting along those lines. And considers that mankind is living in a common village where it needs to flourish. And multilateralism is based itself on the expression of values stemming from our human values and from a legal framework upon which we agree. It's on this basis that peaceful cohabitation of nations is based, security for all, justice for all, peace and well-being for all. Ladies and gentlemen, a few years after the end of the Cold War, the international situation slowly evolved towards a geopolitical configuration characterized by different waves of national selfishness. This reapparition of these practices that seem to be relegated to the past have affected multilateralism and have created silos in the international order and affected the previous consultation and concertation among that defended the interests of the weakest. And multilateralism today is faced with the challenges of the lack of collective response to climate change, violent extremism, terrorism, conflicts, anti-constitutional change, illicit trade of all kinds, pandemics, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and inequality among nations. All of these challenges are based on transnationality, which, like a hydra with multiple heads, renews itself constantly thanks to the resources of a globalization that has put an end to borders. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, faced with these international challenges, which underscore the insignificance of individual efforts by countries, we need to strive towards a renewal of multilateralism where freedom and respect become sacred values. What will be the role of Africa in this new situation? The representativity of the continent in the main multilateral organizations based on responsible for the political consultation, the international financial institutions, the G20 and the UN to date have not respected the role of the more weak. The voice of Africa is almost impossible to hear in those circles where the main decisions are taken, despite these 3 seats for the non-permanent members at the UN Council. They are subjected to decisions that are taken on their behalf without them having any agency. Let's think about structural change, structural adjustment imposed during the 80s, which were actually turned out to be vectors of indebtedness, destabilization, and greater poverty. The emergency of renewing multilateralism should be based on a reform of the international order in its dual role of global political governance and the reform of the financial and monetary system. This demand should not be linked to the request of favors. Africa has several assets that allows it to play an important role in the global affairs and to significantly contribute towards finding solutions to the global challenges. Among these assets, one needs to mention its geopolitical position. The continent spans both the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans, which are maritime throughways for trade. The resources, fishing, mining, etc., could powerhouse our economies, and its democracy in its youth potentially makes it a great consumer market. As we consider multilateralism today, there seems to be a certain geostrategic myopia, which is ignoring the priorities of our continent. But we are willing to consider that with the rest of the world, and particularly with the US, we can find a solution to all of these scourges that I have just described. Thank you so much.
With that, I invite the members of the press to have a good afternoon, and we will now proceed with the rest of our meeting.